This is Suzanne Etkin from the Watershed Stewards Academy with a short presentation on Beyond Grants, Stone Soup Funding. Once upon a time, there was a great famine. People were afraid their families would go hungry, so they hid the small amounts of food they did have. One day, a traveler came into the village. He asked the villagers where he could find food and sleep for the night. "There's not a bite to eat in the whole country," they told him. "You better keep moving on." "Oh, I have everything I need," said the traveler. "In fact, I would like to make some stone soup to share with all of you." He pulled out a big black cooking pot from his wagon. He filled it with water and built a fire under it. Then he slowly reached into his knapsack and pulled out a plain gray stone from a cloth bag and dropped it into the water. By now, hearing about the magic stone, most of the villagers were surrounding the traveler and his cooking pot. As the traveler sniffed the stone soup and licked his lips, he said, "Ah, I do like a tasty stone soup. Of course, stone soup with cabbage is even better." Soon a villager ran from his house into the village square holding a cabbage. "I have a cabbage to add." "Fantastic," said the traveler, and he cut up the cabbage and added it to the pot. Once I had stone soup with cabbage and a bit of beef, and it was delicious." The butcher said he thought he could find some beef scraps. As he ran back to his shop, other villagers offered bits of vegetables from their own gardens: potatoes, onions, carrots, celery. Soon the big black pot was bubbling and steaming. When the soup was ready, everyone in the village ate a bowl of soup, and it was delicious. So your project is a lot like that pot of soup. You start with nothing, and you can put the stone in it. You can put some grant funding, but your grant funding is rarely going to cover all of what you need to make your project really successful. So this presentation explores what the villagers, your villagers, the people and the businesses in your community can add to your project to make it a success. So there's two sources of non-grant funds. There's in-kind donations, and so those are goods or services that are provided without compensation, things you don't have to pay for. So people either do things or they provide actual materials or supplies for your project. And then there's cash donations, and these are donations of cash toward the items budgeted in your project budget. So in terms of in-kind donations, you might have a local printer that agrees to print flyers for free. You might have a neighbor that agrees to pick plants up from the nursery. Delivery charges can be in the hundreds of dollars. So a neighbor with a pickup truck, that's pretty good. You might have a local garden club organize a plant collection from other local gardens. I'm thinking about in the springtime when you're cleaning out your perennial gardens and how those, black-eyed Susans can multiply, and you might have way too many in your garden, but you could repot some for your neighborhood garden. You could have the Girl Scout troop provide refreshments for your planting volunteers. And then, of course, the volunteers themselves are a source of in-kind labor for your projects. And so sources of cash donations, um, the property owner, whoever owns the property where your project is going in, should pay something. Even if it's a very small amount, but certainly if this is a project on someone's property that can afford to pay part of the cost, they should do that. You can also have community members sponsor parts of the garden. So you might have people in your neighborhood each pay $20 to sponsor a tree. So that goes towards your tree purchasing budget. So that's the case where a lot of people paying just a little bit can really take a big chunk out of your budget. Um, Likewise, people in your community could organize some sort of benefit event or sale. So at the St. Luke Project in Eastport, they used to do this Blue and Green Festival, and it would be a big music festival, and people would pay to come to the festival, and the proceeds would actually go to help the project. And then you could just do regular old business sponsorships. The local True Value store might sponsor, become a project sponsor, and they might get some recognition on a project sign or on t-shirts. So there's lots of different ways to get people in your community to buy into your project. Watershed Stewards Academy also buys into your project. So we, as an organization, we raise funds from uh, through grants, through donations from businesses and individuals, and we have a pot of money called the Impact Fund, and we use part of that money to support Steward Capstone projects. So we have earmarked $500 per steward maximum to help you with your capstone project. So wherever you think you need that help, you're going to indicate that on your capstone project budget. Now you're going to talk through with your mentor to make sure that you're expending it and putting it in the right areas. WSA does not buy non-native plants, so you can't expect to have us purchase certain things. WSA also does not reimburse stewards for purchases made, by and large. We have done it in the past, but we don't do it because the purchases should be tax exempt. And so WSA can actually make the purchase for whatever it is that you need, and therefore then it's tax exempt. So when you're making your capstone project budget, you can allocate $500 if you need it, for funds coming from WSA. Many years, stewards will have their projects covered, and so they don't even need any money from WSA. And that allows us to maybe spend a little more than $500 maybe on a project that does need a little bit more help. But in general, we have about $500 per steward put aside. The exception to that is the Replant Anne Arundel program, which you're going to hear about in a couple of sessions, if you don't already know about it. Replant Anne Arundel is a county-wide, so it doesn't apply to the city, county-wide reforestation effort. And we actually have special funds set aside to plant trees. So if you're doing a tree planting in Anne Arundel County, you'll want to be part of Replant Anne Arundel, and there's special grant funding or special funding for that. There is also a copay for the property owner, but you can learn a little bit more of that, about that in a couple of sessions when we have that presentation.